Here we go. Good afternoon and welcome to the City Club of Cleveland, where we are devoted to conversations of consequence that help democracy thrive. It's Wednesday, August 7th. I'm Amy Eddings, host and producer of Morning Edition at Idea Stream Public Media and moderator for today's conversation, which is the fifth forum in the City Club's free outdoor summer series, Underneath the Chandelier, kind of adjacent to the chandelier right here at Playhouse Square. Today's forum is part of the City Club's Authors in Conversation series, as well as City Club's Local Heroes series. It spotlights champions here in Northeast Ohio whose hard work changes the way we view ourselves and our community. And Jeremy Umansky, our local hero today, and I go back a ways, even though I didn't meet him until 2018 when I visited his and wife Allie's Jewish deli and bakery, Larder. Raise your hands, who's been to Larder? Look at all those.
Oh, thank you.
Look at all those eaters, lucky eaters. It opened that same year, 2018. He recognized me from WKSU and also from WNYC. We both used to live in New York City. If you've been to Larder, you know Jeremy's into mushrooms. Mushroom pictures, prints, and tchotchkes are everywhere. Jeremy leads foraging classes for shrooms. He forages for many of the ingredients he uses at Larder, including, as we will find out, milkweed. It's not just for monarch butterflies. He cultures meat and vegetables with koji, a cultivated mold used to make soy sauce, sake, and miso. He's received 4 James Beard Award nominations, including Best New Restaurant, Best Chef, and a James Beard Award nomination for his recent book, Koji Alchemy. Give it up for Jeremy Umansky.
Wow, Amy. I feel like I'm as red as my shorts. Thank you.
So quickly, how long were you in New York City?
We were in the city 5 years, a solid 5 years.
And you came back to Cleveland when?
In 2014.
Now, were you born and raised here?
In the greater Cleveland area. I graduated from Solon.
All right, what year?
This would have been, oh my God, let me think back on the grays. 2001.
Okay.
Yeah.
So let's start off by talking about Koji.
You bet.
Tell me.
I love talking about Koji.
Tell me what it is and why you're so enchanted with it.
So, well, if anybody's ever worked with it, it's immediately relevant why it's so bewitching. It's just a fantastic organism. And to kind of say that about something that is a mold, right? Something we try to kill off in our bathroom, something we throw out normally if we see growing on our food in those circumstances. To be able to use a word like bewitching or intoxicating to describe it really should just tell you off the bat that there's something different about this mold compared to others. So, and quite simply, it is this enzymatic powerhouse that can, on a molecular level, change the taste, flavor, and texture of organic ingredients. It allows us to convert a soybean, which if anybody's ever gone to Japanese, restaurant, meaning just straightforward edamame, right? Steamed soybeans with a little salt on them. And then someone's eating a little soy sauce or eating a bit of miso. It's relatively the same thing. It's a salt and that bean, but when we add koji to it, it transforms it in an incredible way. And when you compare that edamame to one of those koji-derived products, that soy sauce or whatever it may be, it's immediately apparent that something is happening.
And what do you use it for? I know you use it for meat, and I understand that it really speeds up the process of creating a meat like pastrami. Tell me about that.
So yeah, we can actually use the mold to speed up a lot of culinary processes that we would traditionally rely on a lot of physical and chemical-based processes in cooking to do. So things that we normally would rely on, various heat applications or humidity applications or those sorts of things, we can bypass those because koji works so quickly and creates more of a desired result than some of those techniques do in and of themselves. So When you traditionally make pastrami, depending on who makes it, it's up to a month-long process. So you have to take your brisket, you have to butcher it. A lot of people will wet brine it, meaning they put it into a mixture of water and salt with spices, and you let it sit there for up to a month. And during that time, the cut of meat, which is really tough, it tenderizes, it starts to relax. We have all sorts of flavor development that happen during that process. Koji allows us to take that month and condense it to 3 to 5 days, and we can get a similar product. And in a lot of cases, we end up actually with a product that is inherently better because it's more delicious. So, yeah, it allows us to work with meat in so many fun, exciting ways.
And I also know that you've used it for vegetables. You have Koji cured radishes, I think, or beets.
Yeah, so actually what we can do, when we work with ingredients like this that are so transformative, we have to examine what they're transforming, right? So if we decide to apply these molds into the world of charcuterie, we are applying them into methods and processes and techniques that are established. Once we break something down into that understanding, it's irrelevant what the ingredient is. And that being said, we can take a radish or a wild burdock root or a fungus or a carrot, and we can actually put it through these charcuterie making processes and end up with a vegetable that is then charcuterie. So we can take the carrot and we can salt it and we can spice it and we can inoculate it with mold and then we can smoke it. Very similar things that you do if you made a sopressata or like some sort of sausage. So to deny that that is charcuterie because it went through the same processes, these molds have allowed us to kind of re-examine what something is, right? So we've essentially been able to create a whole new methodology in charcuterie making where we can create vegan things out of whole ingredients using these molds. And it's absolutely fantastic.
And of course, if you buy Koji Alchemy, there's recipes in there for you to do it yourself. I should mention.
Thank you for the plug.
If you'd like to text a question for Jeremy, please text it to 330-541-5794. 330-541-5794. City Club staff will try to work it into the program. And we will have Q&A coming up in about 20 minutes. So, Jeremy, one of the things we're talking about is about encouraging people to do this themselves. And human beings have been eating and drinking fermented food for centuries. These processes helped preserve food before refrigeration. So when did it fall out of fashion? When did we lose this knowledge?
I think that depends on the time and place you exist in. So one thing I want you to keep in mind is fermentation as a technology is probably one of the most important technologies we've harnessed from the wild world after harnessing fire. Because fire allowed us to cook our food, and we have very good anthropological evidence that shows the introduction of cooked foods into our diets, especially proteins, is what led to our larger brain size. So our species was actually able to evolve from there. And then the next important thing is reliable, consistent food sources so that we can grow big brains and we can pursue art and science and technology and entertainment and all these things. So kind of coming in, if we come up to more or less modern times, let's take the 1950s, right? World War II revolution with industrialism, right, carrying over from the late 1800s. And then we follow that up with this green revolution that we had in America starting in the 70s. And this wasn't necessarily a greening revolution, but what this was the advent and invention and widespread use of petrochemical-based fertilizers. And that allowed us to grow more things more vigorously, more intensively, closer together, all these things. During this kind of time period, we were essentially told by society, the powers that be, our friends, a company, that
advertising, Madison Avenue.
You bet that things didn't need to be done at home anymore, which in realism, like, that gave birth to women's suffrage movement and feminism and a lot of people to move. But through that too, we were instructed that we didn't have to do anything at home anymore, and that men didn't have to participate, and you could go out and get what you needed. So when this started to happen, the need to ferment flipped from a need to a want. And if you did not want to create a ham at home, or you did not want to make a barrel of sauerkraut or kimchi or some toache, shout out.
What's that?
Toache is, well, it's a great soda made here in Cleveland, actually East Cleveland, right? Cleveland area it's being made in. I apologize. Anyways, it's a traditional fermented pineapple drink from Mexico. You use all the scrap of the pineapple, so the peel, the core, and all the things you don't like eat fresh. You ferment into this lightly alcoholic. It's kind of like a kombucha, but made from pineapple. So
sounds really good.
Yeah. So if you did not want to make these products, and your need was satisfied by just simply going to the grocery store, we start to lose a lot of things. And couple that with defunding public education in the United States and home economics and basic finance no longer being taught in high schools. We have literally multiple generations of people now that have been set up to not understand how these foods are made, to not understand their importance in our evolutionary diet that we still need to adhere to, and many, many other things, plus the socioeconomic factors that go into sourcing fresh food, preserving it versus, just having stuff stored in the freezer. There's a lot to balance.
You remind me of it. I lived briefly in rural Ohio in Ada, which is near Lima, Ohio, and I remember I was doing some journalism there, and I remember talking to an Ohio State University agriculture extension agent in that area, and they held cooking classes for people, like really basic stuff, in part because they found that a lot of families had lost the art of even making basic meals. They were so used to fast food. They were so used to microwavable foods. They were dining on paper plates and plastic forks. Very easy to just get rid of it. No need to have a kitchen. No need to have kitchen supplies. No need to have utensils and plates and all of that stuff. So it goes deep.
I'm really glad you actually brought up the Ohio State Extension Cooperative, and I want everybody here to kind of take this back with you. Ohio State is our public land grant agricultural university in the state. So if you have agricultural questions, gardening questions, anything dealing with food production and food safety, so hey, did I home can my stuff properly? Is my canner safe to use? You can contact, every county in Ohio has an extension office, and you can contact them and you can say, can you help me? I need some seeds for my garden. I would like some native plants to plant. They have them and they'll give them to you for free in most cases. If you have questions about canning, the proper way to pressure can versus other canning, you can literally bring your equipment to their office and they will inspect it and let you know if it's good to use or not. They'll check your jars. They'll even hopefully pH test the acidity of your already canned food just to reassure you that you're doing it safely. That's a very important food safety measure. So use these county extension offices. The people that work in them, they're microbiologists, they're biologists, they're botanists, they're agrarians who study everything from bovine anatomy to, a value-added program for a farmer and start canning and drying your stuff. So use them. They're a resource, and they are part of a university. So you never really have to question the information that they are giving you. It's not a stream you find on Facebook. It isn't a website, whether or not it's from an accredited source. So if you're looking for food safety information, if you're looking for what local plants to plant and to get some seeds and anything in that realm, please use the state agricultural offices.
So off of that, One of the things that we were talking about yesterday prior to this conversation, you talked about the benefits of fermenting and foraging. We will talk a little bit more about foraging, of course, free food. You use a lot of foraged products at Larder. The economic benefits of this, right? You can you mentioned taking scraps and preserving them and fermenting them and
let's kind of even like and we'll touch on the economics, but like first let's understand the few hunter-gatherer societies that still exist in the world, and there's quite a few in the Amazon area, there's quite a few in various parts of Africa, there's even some all throughout Central Asia, nomadic tribes and whatnot. Most hunter-gatherer societies spend 10 to 15 hours a week providing food for themselves. And that is in their society essentially all they need to do, right? They don't have to run the soccer practice, they don't have the constructs of society that we do. They spend 10 to 15 hours a week gathering food, providing for their number one need. Everything else they do can be family time, social visits, life enrichment. Think about if you only had to spend up to 15 hours a week completely providing for your family, and the rest of the time could be whatever pursuit, hopefully something hedonistic that you want to pursue, you know?
Well, you mentioned time, and I'm thinking, I wanted to ask you that because, sure, foraging, you're getting free mushrooms, or
but we still have to travel to a place.
Right,
we have to spend the time gathering them. We have to clean them. I have all these logs and paperwork that we fill out with like various food inspection agencies to like say, okay, this is confirmed. I had to get a license as a licensed mycologist. Like,
and then you add this scary factor of, am I doing it right? Do I have the proper equipment? Did I heat my apple butter to the right temperature? I don't know.
Well, the
sounds like a lot of downside.
Well, yes, but I want you to keep in mind that people have been doing some of these practices. Obviously, canning's a bit different. I mean, that came about with Napoleon's reign. That technology was invented, so the late 1700s. And it wasn't refined for another 100 years after that to kind of what we know it as now. So that's relatively new. But a lot of these other techniques, like people have been doing them. I mean, we can say roughly the dawn of agriculture, 10 to 12,000 years ago, is when we started to harness these processes, but we were probably doing it for millennia, if not tens of millennia before that. I mean, we've roughly been Homo sapiens for about 1 million years, give or take, and we've probably been harnessing fermentation nearly as long as we've been harnessing fire. I mean, if only, maybe we even harnessed it before fire because we could get drunk off of fermented fruit, right? So even before we realized that it was preserving our food and allowing us to safely eat it, you know, you could find there's many varieties of old fruits and vegetables that have very tough skins or would hang onto the plant for a long time. So you could find apples that went through a winter and fermented in their skins. You find that in the spring or late winter and eat that and get wasted. Like, you imagining an early human, you know, with none of this around and just kind of hanging out in the natural environment, like they're going to have a good time. They're probably going to have a settlement put up there, you know? So we've been doing this for so long, and we have actually evolved with the technology. Meaning everybody hears a lot about probiotics and balancing our gut and making sure gut health is healthy because it inflicts the brain gut connection, the heart gut connection, your pulmonary system. We're finding literally these fermented microbes play a role in almost every body system we have. And when we have imbalances in them is when we have a lot of health problems. So we literally evolved with these organisms. So when it comes back to like, am I doing this right? Generally speaking, if it looks good, smells good, or tastes good, canning being the exception, it is good to go. And that's kind of the metrics we go by. And it really has only been the past 30 years that we've had ubiquitous equipment, things like pH meters that weren't the size of a whole table to measure acidity. I can get a little handheld one, shipped to my house next day for $15. So the technology has gotten more accessible, the parts have gotten smaller, it's now and no longer this big cumbersome thing. Now we have further tools to really analyze, is it black and white safe, right? We have developed parameters we can compare it to. So when in doubt, throw it out or ask a professional.
If you're just joining us either online or here in the plaza, I'm Amy Eddings from WKSU Idea Stream Public Media, and our local hero and guest today at the City Club of Cleveland is Jeremy Umansky, author of this book, Koji Alchemy. He's the chef and co-founder of Larder. It's a Jewish deli and bakery in the Ohio City area in Hingetown on West 29th, and you're open today, right?
We are. So if anybody needs dinner, we're open till 6.
All right. Just bring cash because
cash or Venmo. Right. There's still 2 ways we can balance technology.
All right. So let's talk about foraging. What tips do you have for people who want to find good things to eat in the great outdoors?
So first and foremost, how many of you out here are bothered by bugs? Come on, you can raise your hand. It's cool, right? They're creepy crawly. I get it. You don't have to be embarrassed. How about like gooey wet things? Sticking your hands in places that you can't necessarily see, right? That's a big one for a lot of people. Like, I'm not putting my hand in there, even if it's an empty box. You're like, I don't know what's in it. So the first thing is you need to be comfortable in wild environments. So go sit on a log in the forest and let some bugs land on you. Look at the spiders in the trees, see where their webs are, touch one. Go ahead, touch a fungi. Put your hands in the wet leaf litter. Do some things. Anything we do in life, half of it's this mental game, right? Like we have to get over this hurdle. And we actually, Richie, my co-author, and I, my research partner, we actually discussed one of the opening chapters of Koji Alchemy. The biggest thing in any of this is getting over these mental hurdles of, am I going to kill myself? Am I going to kill other people? Am I going to get injured? What if I burn it? What if it explodes? Like any of these, you need to prep yourself and be like, no, I'm going to do this. Other people have done this. I can do this, right? I can be comfortable with this. So I encourage you to first find ways that you can get comfortable in a wild environment. The other thing is too, we don't necessarily have a lot of public lands. And the public lands that we do have, a lot of them have actually laws against foraging in them, like the Cleveland Metro Parks, right? There's a lot of us in an urban area. We all use this for green space, so they have to take a very black and white approach. If you want to preserve this space, you stay on the trail and you don't touch anything. This way, everybody gets fair and equal access to this land all the time. So I encourage people to always check with where you can and can't go and what you can and can't forage. Because from municipality to municipality, listen, from Cleveland's eastern border to 271, how many cities do you go through? Each one with different rules about their parks and their public lands, and if you can touch something and take something, and so there is a lot of onus on you to be responsible in that matter.
Name one place that you go to that you recommend.
One of the great resources is our state parks. Ohio state parks allow for certain types of foraging, including mushroom foraging. You're not allowed to dig in state parks, and you're not allowed to cut down a limb off a tree and that sort of thing. But you can pick a wild apple. You can pick a milkweed floret. You can cut a hunk of mushrooms. So state parks are great. And within an hour drive of downtown Cleveland, on the southwest side, we have Finley State Park. And then as we go far east, we have Nelson Kennedy Ledges. And then a little bit south of that, but still east, is Punderson State Park. So you have some great areas. And one thing to keep in mind, national parks, off limits, any national park. But the National Park Service has different levels of parks. And in Ohio, for example, Wayne National Forest, which is in the Hocking Hills area, you can actually apply and get a permit that allows you to commercially harvest fungi in that forest, and that you can then take and sell and use and do all these things. So it's a lot of confusing things. It's taken me many years to kind of understand how these jurisdictions are layered and who allows you to do what. But when in doubt, ask. Call City Hall.
with regard to milkweed, which I'm fascinated by,
we talked about this the other day.
Florets. Milkweed in your backyard, recommended to do that, or
yes,
should you be worried about people who spray their lawns for dandelions?
So here's the thing: you gotta ask your neighbors. Are you putting stuff in your lawn before you pick something out of their yard? Just because they're applying something topically doesn't mean it's going to be persistent in your yard, right? There'll be some drift and some runoff and that sort of thing, but they're designed to be put on heavily right away, so that the runoff into your yard isn't necessarily to levels that we're told are acceptable and safe and all those things. So, that shouldn't be a concern. But, if you're in an urban environment, stay away from the dumpsters. Maybe you don't want to pick weeds out of the sidewalk, but if you're next to the convention center, you notice there's apple and cherry trees there, go ahead, pick the fruit and eat it, Some of it's common sense sensibility too.
We have 5 minutes left before
Yeah.
we go to audience Q&A. I'd like to conclude with a memory of one of your chanterelle outings that you invited me to. The group celebrated one another's finds. We were outside. It felt like a treasure hunt. It was really pleasurable. Have we lost the pleasure principle in our eating and cooking habits?
Well, I think a lot of us have. I think a lot of us, and I understand the, I'm a need to eat instead of want to eat person, and, food isn't a priority for me, but we are organic systems, all right? We cannot not eat. And you have to make a choice. We now know, we have accumulated knowledge that tells us if we put certain things into our bodies, bad things will happen. If we put other things into our body, good things will happen, or nothing will happen, which is better than a bad thing happening. So we now understand this, and it's really up to us to kind of personally be like, my body is a freaking temple. Right, and none of us are perfect. Like I use a vaporizer, I use nicotine, I'm effectively still a smoker. So none of us can do these things 100%. But to start making a conscious decision to say, I want to live a long life. I want to live a long, happy, productive life. I want to live a long life to be there for other people around me and for my enjoyment. And by doing that, if we start throwing hedonism back into eating, that isn't a junky way, right? Like if you think of like the craziest junk food that you could crave or want, like going to a ball game or a county fair or that sort of thing. And then I want you to think of a perfectly ripe peach picked by like Rittman Orchards in Medina County. And you're holding that peach and it smells so peachy. It's in fact, one of our chef de cuisine, Joey, said this to me the other day. He said their peaches smell so peachy, I think it's artificial peach aroma. Like to compare that. And then if we look at the peach as an organic thing, it is, and we're gonna cut it in half. That peach, I don't know if this is a word, but that peach is vaginistic. It's a reproductive part of the plant, and it is very apparent that it is a reproductive organ. And it's glistening and it's wet and it's sweet and it's juicy, right? Like there's other vegetables we can pick that are very phallic. So we can balance out, right? We could talk about zucchini, but understanding the interplay between our primal wants and how we can take care of ourselves in a positive way, and understanding that all those wonderful sun-soaked attributes about that peach, a bag of Cheetos can never come close. A hot dog maybe can come close if it's made the right way, but really, anything from a hot dog to a bag of chips to a candy bar
or even sugar that we think chocolate. We pursue hedonism.
Well, let's leave chocolate out of here. Yeah. We don't need to drink chocolate in
every day. But yes, but that we look to sugar.
Yeah.
To refine sugar instead of the natural sugars in a peach, and call that hedonism.
I want people.
You're wanting people to engage with local food in that way.
Well, I do, and I also want you to understand that kind of like what you look at as perfection in your head for food, and what you should be spending your money on, and that you should be. We're all fostering this idea of perfection in food that doesn't exist. As a chef, If I am given arugula by Ohio City Farm that is loaded with holes from this bug called flea beetles, I know that arugula is probably 5 times more flavorful than the stuff that doesn't have holes, that was micro cut and was grown on a factory farm, that monocrops and doesn't grow anything else. So we have to understand there's this flip of aesthetic beauty in food. You want to see a scab on an apple, right? It means like the farmer wasn't putting tons of fungicides and herbicides and pesticides in the environment. You want to see a little bruise on this and that. Like, it is okay, you know?
I love that. I love that challenge to our way of thinking about food. It's time for the question and answer session here. This very real, live, organic space outside the City Club of Cleveland in Playhouse Square. Again, folks who are watching virtually, text your question at 330-541-5794. City Club staff will try to work it into the program. I see someone at the microphone. Our first questioner. May I have your name?
Good afternoon. This is Lou.
Hey, Lou.
Hello, Lou.
I'm so glad that you are here telling us that the food with the fermentation process should always go together, because it's not only environmental sustainable, it's also healthy. Delicious too. However,
Very delicious.
However, instead of having a gourmet food, or you mostly talk about the individual action, I would like to ask, how should we utilize all these knowledges and the actual product to go between individually homemade and the mass production commercially made? How will we push this out to decrease our food desert in the city of Cleveland? Because we have a bigger and bigger food deserts throughout the city, and we really need to help people out to get health back. Thank you.
Thank you, Lou.
Thank you, Lou. That's a fantastic question. All right. So I want to think about, it is a little off topic, but think about parking for a second. All right. The city of Cleveland does not need more parking. We do not need more surface lots. We already have, I believe it's roughly 40% more parking infrastructure than we need for the actual citizens and the amount of people that work in this city on a daily basis. That being said, there was a fantastic study. My good friends, Cynthia and Nikki, they have this awesome podcast called Gastropod. It's all about food and science. They're lovely ladies. They actually featured Cleveland in an episode, I believe in 2019 or 2020, because there was somebody, I believe, at Cleveland State. And what I'll do is I'll forward the info to the City Club so we can post this study for people to access somewhere. So if I'm giving you the wrong numbers, I apologize. But I believe Cleveland using urban agriculture could support a population 4 times of its current size as of roughly 2020. Solely using urban agriculture, a population 4 times our size, all located in Cuyahoga County in the city of Cleveland. That is absolutely insane. So what we need to do, we've got to do a few things. All of you need to talk to your local council person, and you say, I would like to see legislation that address bringing agricultural dollars, more of them, into Cuyahoga County. You know, a lot of the other counties get those subsidies. Let's bring agricultural back here. Let's capture on that. Let's find ways to provide small grants to small entrepreneurs who want to get into agricultural things, whether they want to raise animals in the city and process them, whether they want to make cheese, whether they want to start a brewery, whether they want to make fermented foods. All right. So go ahead and talk, because if we have the support of our government and the people here, that's how we got to get things changed. And they need to hear your voice. They have to know that this is a real concern for you. And then you've got to vote with your dollars. Instead of spending money with massive corporations that are nameless and faceless in our city, in our area, start supporting people like Cleveland Kitchens, which is making fermented food using locally sourced produce here in the city of Cleveland. All right. Start supporting organizations like Riddle They're in the Lower East Side here. It's a black farming co-op, literally in an area where you do hear gunshots and you have to be worried for your safety. They are this amazing green oasis producing fresh food. Put pressure on other local organizations and hold them accountable for access to fair food and the spaces too. I'd like every one of you, you're going to contact your council people. I want you to also contact places like Cleveland Clinic and say, hey, you spend all this money landscaping your lands that border areas that are considered socioeconomic downturns, bad areas of the city, quote unquote, ghettos, whatever we want to call them, areas that have been redlined and glossed over. Well, why don't you landscape all your parking lots with apple trees and put a little sign on here that says, this is an apple tree. Help yourself to a healthy snack from the Cleveland Clinic. It will keep you healthy. It will provide food to you. You put up a little infographic. You put a little line up there that says, it's your liability walking around this tree to stay safe, right? Don't slip on the apples. And we can get other community partners to be engaged with eradicating these food deserts, right? So it isn't just putting businesses and access to food in through the markets, right? Let's create green spaces in these areas too. If they look lush and green and beautiful, areas like Mount Pleasant, areas like St. Clair, if we get them to be these lush, beautiful places, I guarantee things will fill in, right? Nobody wants to live in a neighborhood with, decrepit buildings and streets that aren't tree lined and don't have a sidewalk to walk on. Like, come on, none of us want that. It doesn't matter what your socioeconomic class is. So put pressure on city council, put pressure on our community partners to take more of that burden away from all of our tax dollars too. An organization, once again, like the clinic, that's a nonprofit. They could easily work on something.
You remind me that Cleveland currently has a tree planting initiative to increase the tree canopy by 30%.
We're the forest
by
city.
2030. You call the city and encourage them to plant fruit trees.
100%. Ask them. Call and send an email to the city arborist and say, hey, I'd like you to plant Saskatoon berries. They are a native plant. They plant them all over in strip malls and everything. They flower beautifully. They're great for pollinators, and they produce a fruit that you can eat. And then we put up a little plaque that says, hey, it's here. We can put native fruit and nut trees up to help, our local insect populations, our local animal populations, allow them and us to be fed at the same time. We just have to create these kind of government and NGO and private and public partnerships, and we can make these things happen. We got to hear your voices.
Our next question, please. Hi.
Hi, good afternoon. We have a text question.
Okay.
You've published stories about foods most folks don't tend to eat, like the history of eating squirrel in America. Can you discuss the importance of breaking down cultural barriers to eating beyond our basic chicken, beef, and pork? And what foods do you wish more people added to their meals?
Thank you for that question. My dad used to eat squirrel.
It's really delicious.
Yeah.
Who likes rabbit? Anybody? Yeah, see, okay, there's a few hands in here that still eat rabbit. Squirrel and rabbit, they're great. Cuy. Anybody ever go to South America, eat guinea pig? Nobody? I took some people out foraging that were just in Peru recently, and they ate a ton. So, this is a really, really fascinating question. The thing I want most people to do is eat a wider variety and more diversity in your diet. Try to set a goal. From the time you eat chicken at one meal to the time you eat it again, try to let a few days to a week pass. I try to go 10 days between every type of animal that I would eat, per meal. And so if I eat beef at lunch today, I do not eat beef again for another 10 days. I then try trout. Salmon, I only like to eat raw. But, I get other fish. I eat a lot of lake fish, which, we'll hear Friday, whether that's a really good thing to do or not. But we have to eat. We don't have a choice. And I'd much rather eat things out of this lake than the oceans with the mercury and the fishing. And we have to make a choice at some point, So, but eat a wide variety of foods. Chicken breast and chicken thigh are not two different foods. So purposely seek out to eat these different cuts, right? a hot dog and then maybe a nice pork chop later. And those are not different foods, right? Those are the same animal. I forget who ran the study, but about 2 years ago, a study came out that the average American, only the majority of their diet, like 80%, is made up of 12 different species. So we have chicken, beef, pork, lamb, right? There's four.
I really get into a run.
Yeah, soy, corn, wheat, canola, and there's a couple others. Like, we just described the majority of the American diet. Like, where's the tomato? Where's the eggplant? Where's the zucchini? Where's the mushrooms? Where's the fish? These other animals. We have to understand too that on some level, farming of large animals is not necessarily on the scales that we're doing them now with the amount of people we have to feed. This is a whole different conversation. There's billions of us now. There isn't millions. We need to have our animals are in the billions to feed billions of us. How much space do you think us and them are all taking up? So spread out and eat more things. Eat small game. Start asking your farmers to get you quail. Raise that. Eat rabbit. Eat guinea pig. These are also things that most municipalities around here, they let you keep chickens. You can keep a couple rabbits. You can keep some quail. If you are someone that wants to have a full connect with where your food comes from and go from live animal to meat, you have that ability. Otherwise, you can contract with farmers and local processors that can do that for you, but you can still have a hand and a choice in creating your own food in a very simple, low-tech way. So eat a huge variety of things. That's the biggest thing. And seek out foods that maybe aren't normalized to you. Maybe decide, instead of your house that does chicken 3 nights a week, maybe start making one of those nights duck.
I love duck.
Or turkey.
And that's the benefit too of being a part of the CSA. Remind me what that stands for.
So community supported agriculture.
Right, because there would be things that when I did it, there would be things in that law.
Yeah,
it's
and
like
let's
kohlrabi.
give-
It's like, okay, I got to do something with kohlrabi.
But yeah, let's give some local shout outs. Ohio City Farm, you can buy a share, and once you prepay it, and then once a week you go and pick up and you get it. The fine guys at Ohio City Provisions, they have their Fresh Fork Market, which gets product from like 70 different Amish farms in a 3-county area, and you go and pick up all this locally produced stuff and mix and match of it and everything. You have the Riddall Cooperative on the east side. I believe they do shares. You have City Fresh, which is kind of based out of the Oberlin Food Hub, but they do a lot of work in the city in Cuyahoga County, and you can get shares through them. And these are great opportunities for you to get a surprise box every week and learn to love an ingredient. You cannot tell me you don't like mushrooms. I have eaten over 175 species of fungi. So until you kind of hit numbers like that, you cannot tell me you don't like fungi, because you haven't eaten enough and you haven't eaten them cooked enough ways to make that conclusive decision that you don't like fungi. There will be one out there. There'll be a vegetable that you like.
Our next questioner, tell me your name.
Sure, my name's Josh.
Hi, Josh. What's your question for Jeremy?
Good to see you, Josh.
Yeah, right on. My question is, what do you think the biggest opportunities are for you in terms of local food in our vernacular, our region, in both for flavor and hedonism, but also potentially for commerce? Like, what do we have going for us, flavor and commercially, that maybe other places don't? What do you think people are missing out on? What should we be thinking about?
We arguably are at the crux of some of the greatest ecosystems of North America. Literally, Cedar Hill is one of the first foothills of the Appalachian Mountains, okay? So at that demarcation line, everything east of there is an Appalachian into the Great Northern Forest of the New England, into the Great Lakes ecosystem. Everything west of Cedar Hill is technically the start of the Great Divide, where the Great Plains ecosystem kicks off. And then we throw the lakes into that. So we have the largest field-based ecosystem in North America, the second largest forest-based ecosystem after the Pacific Northwest, and then we have the greatest freshwater resource in the world, all in Cleveland. You can be back and forth between all three of these ecosystems before lunchtime, all right? each one of these ecosystems inherently and naturally had so many different organisms and foods that made the food that you would eat just a little bit west of here drastically different than the food you would have eaten just a little bit east of here, going back roughly 100 years. So at that time, when we were so divided up and food was so regional and we didn't have homogeneity across the board, right, from New York to San Francisco, you had to go to different locations to eat a different food because we couldn't ship it yet and all these different things. So we are in an area that is so unique. Our biodiversity rivals the Pacific Northwest in terms of fungi and wild plants. Our attraction, we have a greater attraction of organisms. We have everything from large grazers to fish, right, that you can get in one spot. And then you can pick a wild pawpaw, you know, and have a tropical tasting fruit, or get a mayapple out of the forest. They look and taste like lava and they grow here. You know, so there is so many unique things. We could take up another 2 hours just breaking it down by ingredient. But I think what's more important is to honor the traditions of the people that were in these lands before us, right? Whether it was the indigenous and the native communities here and how they procured food and what they ate, whether it was the next wave of oppressors and then the immigrants and then all these different waves of people, kind of we have to look at not what we have just naturally, but what has also been brought here and kind of become part of who we are, for better or for worse, right? All those things happen. So it's a really, really fascinating place to be. And I'll tell you what, as far as ecosystems go in North America, the Great Lakes ecosystem is the safest. And we've talked about this. We don't have black widow spiders. We don't have poisonous snakes like rattlesnakes up here yet. We will probably in 20 years. As
we do have tornadoes, though.
Yeah, we get tornadoes every once in a while, but we don't have wildfires on the scale that they do, west of the Rockies. We don't get hurricanes, wiping us out. We do have some localized flooding and that sort of thing, but we don't get washed away by the ocean, complete communities. So we don't have mountain lions here. We don't have like a lot of the crazy apex predators like the big brown bears, and the grizzlies and wolves and stuff. So this is a very safe place to be. It's a very financially it's very affordable to start up here. So kind of as we're getting ready to wrap up too, I want to challenge all Clevelanders to reinvest in themselves and reinvest in their local infrastructure. There is going to be a lot of people from fire-ravaged areas in North America, from flood-ravaged areas in North America. You can't get homeowners insurance in parts of Florida and California now. If you've lost everything, you're going someplace inexpensive and safe. And I'll tell you what, Chicagoland is too expensive. People are going to come here. They're going to look at Detroit. They're going to look at Buffalo. But what's attractive about us specifically is Buffalo still gets really bad weather. Climate change, for good or for bad, has changed ours enough that we don't have the crazy winters anymore. So somebody relocating from the south, from a coast area on the west coast that's used to warm areas, they're going to have a much easier time settling here than they are on the eastern edge of the Great Lakes where the winds still whip and dump tons of snow.
We have another question from our online guests.
Correct, yes. Another text question. Many of the practices we've heard today have been around for centuries with indigenous nations on these lands, but the knowledge and ecosystems have been intentionally wiped out due to colonization. Can we talk about what it means to decolonize your diet?
Yes, we definitely can. And straight up, like what happened was nothing shy of extermination and genocide to the natives that were here, right? And like we all need to do two things. We have to find ways that we don't completely eradicate them and what's left of their knowledge and their ways and prop them up, right? We have to reconcile this in some way, right? Where we can communicate and we can prop them up. So there is so many indigenous ingredients here that we rely on that have been forgotten.
Sassafras, you use that?
Yeah, we use sassafras at the restaurant. And for those that don't know, the sassafras leaves are dried and used in filet gumbo down in the south in Louisiana. Filet powder is dried sassafras leaves. The leaves are used for tea. And then sassafras as a whole is the main ingredient in North American style root beer. So any root beer you drink, or if you like those styles of drinks, are made from it. So there are many of these ingredients, and a lot of them not only have the use of the ingredient, the knowledge been lost, but how to kind of take care of the ingredient in the greater ecosystem. So like ramps are a prime example. Like most of us Westerners, we go out and we dig the whole ramp. And just so you know, the word Chicago is a corruption of, I believe it's Chigungik, which means land of the smelly onions in one of the Iroquois tongues. So Chicago is named after the ramp, the wild garlic that grows here along the southern ring of the Great Lakes into Appalachia. So we have a lot of these things, and ramps are a prime example. They can take up to 7 years to go from a seed to something that's actually worth harvesting. Okay, so it takes a long time. A lot of the natives would just clip a leaf per plant, and then they would then wait for the plant to go into its flowering cycle, set its seeds, and then they would dig a few bulbs later in the season. Now we just run into the forest and we grab the whole ramp now and we sell it for $20 a pound at the farmer's market in the spring. So, you know, there is an ingredient that, you know, through a little research, through reconnecting with Native communities, we're able to kind of be like, well, no, this is how it should be properly managed. We shouldn't just dig up the whole clump like we do in European style agriculture, right? A lot of the native styles of agriculture were fully integrated into the environment. Instead of like clearing the land and saying, I'm going to plant something here, they found something that was already there that was producing food and found ways to make sure that habitat stayed conducive for the growth of that food and its perpetuity, right? So the next generation could be a bigger patch there. So nowadays, outreach, there's many different organizations, especially up in the upper Great Lakes region. There's a chef named Sean Sherman. They call him the Sioux Chef. He has restaurants, and he is also part of an organization that promotes indigenous and native foodways and what ingredients were here pre-colonialism and how that impacted, you know, those people. Once the natives that were here, once Europeans came over and were like, you're going to eat wheat instead of your corn. You know, a lot of health problems happen in those communities too. So we literally have like 400 years now of people who've been suffering, you know, from health afflictions brought on by a diet that wasn't indigenous or native of their own, because they were told all their food was bad and that it wasn't the good stuff back in Europe and all this. So hopefully now I feel we're at the point where we're about to start exploding with native knowledge being resurfaced, documenting. There's so many people that this is so important to. It shouldn't be important to all Americans. It should be something that's really important, because like at Adorami, Chef Sherman, nobody is cooking more American food than that team right now. They are pre-colonial, pre-industrial ingredients that are only found in the Great Lakes area, and that's what they serve day in and day out.
Sounds like a cool place.
It's really, really fantastic. So even in the Cleveland area, we have native populations. We have people doing this work. We have, you know, like we know Cynthia here at the City Club. She comes from Native heritage, both her and her husband, and they do very specific things. So even just talking to your neighbors and being like, hey, you know, what food traditions were here that like I could incorporate into me being here now.
Another question from online.
Here's the next question. If someone wants to get started with home fermentation, what would you recommend as a starting place?
If you want to get started with home fermentation, I totally recommend starting with cabbage. That's the first and foremost. A lot of people think they should start with cucumber, and I want to let you know the only reason that pickles that are cucumbers are the pickle now is because cucumbers were one of the early crops that we bred to withstand the rigors of transportation as the rails were being built and we had ice carts. So people bred varieties of cucumbers that would stay really firm and that could ship and hold that, you know, not the cold temperatures we need now that we know we should store them at, but cooler temperatures, right? 50 degrees, 60 degrees to be shipped from one area to another. So, and because of that, it became this market commodity that was traded and preserved and not necessarily a food, and became established as the pickle. So cucumbers, though, are actually notoriously difficult to ferment and pickle. They have really high water contents, and the fruit, what's left of the blossom, the flower that turned into the fruit, it actually produces an enzyme that will cause the flesh of the cucumber to rot, which triggers a reaction that actually matures and ripens its seeds, right? This is how it worked in its proto-ancestor before we bred it into what we now call as a cucumber. So I recommend staying away from those. Stay with cabbage. make something you're comfortable with. I want you to keep in mind, sauerkraut, the tradition for making shredded pickled cabbage, actually was a Silk Road thing, came out of China. They were doing it first, all right? Not the China we know today, but areas that are now part of China, or where that came from and traveled along and eventually went to Europe and, was codified in a different tradition there. I want you to keep in mind, those of you enjoying kimchi, that did not exist in its current forms until about 400 years ago, when the chili pepper went from South and Central America via Portuguese merchants to Southeastern Asia. So even if you get in, you're like, I'm going to make a kimchi, that's a relatively new food in the scope of how we eat as we know it today with the chilies and stuff. So you could actually make a pre-colonial, exploration area kimchi, right? And just use the cabbage and not do the chilies. Use pepper instead, and mustard and garlic for the heat. But work with cabbage. It's very flexible. It's very inexpensive too. So if your fermentation project goes awry and gets moldy or gets funky or just you don't like it, you can hopefully compost it with Rust Belt Riders at one of their many local community vegetable scrap and organic scrap drop-off sites, right? Or you get something that's great and you can eat it. And
You're not a fan of sourdough?
Sourdough is great, but then you have to actively make bread and bake bread, and there's a nuance and art and a love, and bread making isn't for everybody. Some people really love the act of working with dough and the time put into it, but as far as that goes, I say start with cabbage, because you literally need nothing else besides a container and some salt, and then you can ferment it. Other veggies, like I said, they maybe need a little help or balance from another ingredient. But start with cabbage. It's really fun, especially this time of year too. As the local farmers are cutting their heads of cabbage, and a lot of them do this cut and come again technique, where you can cut the whole head of cabbage off. You don't cut the whole plant down, and then these little heads start growing around where you cut the big head from. So really soon here, a lot of farmers, you'll see they're bigger than Brussels sprouts. But I really love to ferment those whole. Yeah, you just kind of pound them with the salt. There's a weight ratio. Use 2% salt by weight of the ingredients, and you kind of mash it and pound the whole heads, and then put them in a jar. And they're so cool.
Jeremy is going to stay after to sign books and to also, if you have questions about doing what he just described. Thank you, Jeremy, for joining us at the City Club today. It was really great to hear from you.
It's so good hanging out with you, Amy, and thanks to the City Club, and thanks to Cleveland for coming out.
The City Club's Outdoor Summer Series is sponsored by Thompson Hine with additional support from Cliffs. It's also part of the City Club in the Community Series, sponsored by Bank of America. The Authors in Conversation Series with support from Cuyahoga Arts and Culture, and the Cuyahoga County Public Library. And finally, it is part of the City Club's Local Heroes series with support from Citizens and Enbridge. Next Wednesday, August 14th, we will be back here for the final, yes, summer is coming to a close, final Outdoor Series Forum. We will learn more about universal basic employment, what it is and is not, and what we can expect from Cleveland's pilot program. Councilwoman Howes, Devin Cotton, and Ken Surratt with the United Way will join that conversation. Learn about each of these forums and what's next at the City Club at cityclub.org. Thank you once again to Jeremy. Thank you, members and friends of the City Club. I'm Amy Eddings, and this forum is now adjourned.